Mysteries, miracles, and messages, exploring the divine through science and scripture. Whether you believe deeply, doubt often, or just love ancient stories, we invite you to join us as we look at how faith and science sometimes meet in the most beautiful and surprising ways. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Chatting with Slava the Jordanian. I'm your host, STJ, and we are so excited to be back with our panel, Dr. Ihab Abdelrehim and JD Yusef, our one and only JD Yusef. So we decided to share with you guys one of the most amazing, incredible discoveries of modern science, that the Quran has actually spoke about this evidence and this discoveries 1400 years ago. Now, as I mentioned in the past, I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia. I was taught and I was schooled in a very much Wahhabism, conservative schools that taught religion very specifically about deciphering Al-Quran. We spend a lot of time listening to Sheikh al-Sha'rawi, very, very famous scholar, Egyptian scholar. And that was our extra curriculum activities, is to watch him on TV and listen to him on the radio on deciphering and explaining Al-Quran. One of the surah that came across, it's called At-Tariq. And let me read to you guys what the surah starts. Surah At-Tariq. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. والسماء والطارق وما أدراك ما الطارق النجم الثاقب إن كل نفس لما عليها حافظ. So imagine I am 8-9 years old and this has been recited to me in school. I have no idea what that means or what that meant, but it had a huge influence on our understanding or our appreciation or our belief in God's creation. So when I was in school, they explained to me that God was talking about the heavens, the sky, the stars. So there is a star out there that makes a noise. We thought it was a symbol of God's different creation other than humans and other than the earth. Basically, it's a reference to the galaxy. Because the discoveries in the 80s were not quite there yet, not like the recent discoveries that actually decoded or explained what the surah was talking about. When I found that out, remember my knowledge as a 8 years old or 12-year-old or 14-year-old, I took that with the grain of salt that, there are other creations out there in the galaxy. But when the new discoveries happened, it blew my mind. That's why we are inviting you guys today in order to take a look at a micro view of what that recent discoveries are all about. So I would like to bring in JD Yusef, since he has done a lot of this research and set up the format of this episode. And let's just start with what you found as far as that discovery, and then we're going to bring in the student of science, which is Ihab, as a scientist that came across that discovery and the impact of that discovery. So
thank you so much, Dr. Slava, and to our audience as well. Yes, so Tariq means the one who knocks, or nightcomer in Arabic. The Quran describes it as a piercing or striking star, and some scholars suggest this may align with what modern astronomy calls a pulsar, a type of neutron star that emits regular pulses of radiation, often likened to a cosmic heartbeat or knocking sound. And of course, Dr. Ihab is going to elaborate a little bit more on that as well. But honestly, this was revealed in the 7th century, and pulsars were only discovered in 1967, and it was actually by Jocelyn Bell Burnell. But with that being said, I'll hand it over to Dr. Ihab.
Thank you very much, J.D. Yusef. And thank you, Dr. Slava. So let me give you kind of a little background on pulsars. They were discovered in 1967, so they're a type of star or celestial formation that happens from a dying star. For instance, the mass of our sun here, our star, will never become a pulsar. It will never supernova. It's too small. So what happens is the size of a star that creates a pulsar is large enough that once it starts to collapse in on itself, because of its gravity, it runs out of fuel. It creates this pulsar from its gravity, and it's actually, if you come near a pulsar, I believe the gravitational force is much higher than our sun, for instance. Other stars with a certain size will collapse in on itself, explode into a supernova, and I believe other stars will collapse and become a black hole. Okay? So you have all these different kind of results from different size stars. So a pulsar, when it is created, it creates this like pulsating light, right, in the universe. Using a radio telescope, what's really neat is it can actually pick up the sound from that frequency of pulse and convert it to, that radio telescope converts it to sound. So it creates that knocking sound. And so I believe the knocking sound was more recent, I think late 20th, first or early 21st century. The sound was converted. The view of a pulsar was correct. It was discovered in 1967, actually seeing a pulsar. So, you are now linking that with the Quran because, back, 14, 1500 years ago when it was written, it's like, well, nobody understood what that meant. So when Slava read it at a young age, again, she probably didn't understand it at that time. So kind of that's the science behind it. And now we want to talk about the link of science to scripture. So this is kind of where I leave it for Dr. Slava to kind of link those two together.
So this is interesting. وَالسَّمَاءِ وَالطَّارِقِ, that's how the surah starts. And if you translate it by the heaven and the nightly star, well, it's not a nightly star, it's a knocking star. Okay, so that's the English translation. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الطَّارِقِ, and what will make you realize what the nightly star is? If I would translate وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الطَّارِقِ, it's a very poetic way of saying that, do you know anything about the knocking star? Or do you wonder about the knocking star? And then it goes into recognizing that star, النجم الثاقب. It is the star of piercing brightness, which is a true translation. So a thaqib, when you pierce a thuqub, which is a hole, or the piercing of something really sharp. So its brightness is very sharp. إِنَّ كُلَّ نَفْسٍ لَمَّا عَلَيْهَا حَافِظٌ. Now, that's very interesting. So the first 3 ayahs starts with, there is a knocking star up there. Were you ever wondering, or would you like to know, or does that intrigue you that there is a knocking star out there? So the 3 ayat, 3 verses talks about, and that's how the ayah surah starts. It draws you right in. It's like, wait a second, Najm Thaqib, a piercing star. And then it goes, there is no soul without a vigilant angel recording everything. إن كل نفس لما عليها حافظ. عليها حافظ means like they're recording or memorizing somebody's work or action. فلينظر الإنسان مما خلق. Now, that's very interesting. So it goes from the heavens and the galaxy and the stars. Then it says, إن كل نفس لما عليها حافظ. There is no soul without a vigilant angel recording everything. Be warned. And then it goes, let people then consider what they were created from. That's just a reminder that not only God is watching, but also a reminder, do not forget how you were created. It's fascinating, the composition of the surah, the first 3 verses, it's all about the galaxy and the star. Then a quick reminder that I'm watching you, I'm recording everything that you do. And then right after that, don't forget where you came from. So that is fascinating. However, this episode is all about that star that was recorded knocking in space. So again, as a child reading this, there are so many hidden messages. God is saying, look at the creation of the galaxy. Then God's saying, watch out, I'm watching you. Then God is saying, don't forget where you're coming from. Right? I created you from a clot of blood and then created the fetus in the womb and so forth and so on. So that's the miracle of the Quran, whether you believe or not, whether you doubt or not, the poetic setup of the Quran. My dad was a writer and we were a reading family. I read so many different styles of writings. Kafka, creative writing, historical writings, political writings, philosophical writings. I never read anything like the Quran, and that's the miracle of the Quran. So let's tap into the comparison, or even J.D. Yusef as a Christian Orthodox. When you read that, or when you read that translation, what went through your mind reading this?
Yeah, honestly, this isn't something that's like counterintuitive to my faith, right? I mean, we're talking about an Abrahamic faith at the end of the day. Yeah, it's actually quite remarkable, to say the least. Again, it's something that was mentioned, again, like I said, in the 7th century, and then kind of, say, rediscovered in our time. And I'm sure there's many things just like that as well, not to take away anything, any religious significance from any one faith, but I think it harkens back to this ancient knowledge which was given to us from somewhere, right? And again, that's where faith kind of kicks in, but it's actually quite remarkable and beautiful. So, Dr. Ihab?
Yeah, so this surah, I'd never heard about it, and I believe somebody sent me something through Instagram, and I watched it, and I'm like, this is weird, And I started going down a rabbit hole. I started going, okay. I looked it up online, the Quran, thought-provoking, and then the knocker, and then I said, then they linked in again that Instagram video and post was about how it links that verse in the Quran with this pulsar, and how the Quran actually had predicted this, like you said, in the 7th century. From the 7th century till now, until it was discovered, nobody understood what that even meant. It was a bright star in the sky. It was the knocker, right, as a translation. But again, a pulsar does have a piercing light, but you can't see it without a telescope. So until you had created a telescope, you're not going to be able to see it. You see many stars in the sky, but pulsars were not one that you can see like visually with your eye. So, or you couldn't even say it was making that thumping noise, that knocking noise, until a radio telescope converted that signal, that visual signal, to a sound, right? So, it's a really, I think that's kind of the thing about the Quran and its ability to have, it's still, things are still in there that's kind of unknown, and we are realizing and learning over time, just like the creation of an embryo. What year was that? It wasn't till the last 100 years or so that we actually figured out how the cell division and everything with respect to a baby's formation. So these that's what makes the Quran, like, I think, unique in a way as a piece of scripture, an Abrahamic scripture, that its revelations are still to be kind of discovered in the future that we don't understand yet. There are parts of the Quran which have 3 letters in there that nobody understands what these letters mean. They start, a surah with like 3 letters. So, or, what do these 3 letters mean? There's 3 separate letters, like ABC or whatever it might be. Why would the Quran even have something like that? It makes no sense. No, it makes no logical sense why you would start a verse or a surah with 3 letters that are not linked in any way. They mean nothing to each other, these letters. And then the surah starts, right? So, this is something that interests me as a scientist, where, when is the next discovery going to happen for us in our time that links back and connects to the Quran verse that we don't even understand yet? So, I'm going to kind of put this in Slava's hands now, because she's the one that took a lot of this in her religion or courses in Saudi. And for me, I wasn't really, I didn't follow the religion as much as Slava did, or learned about it as much, because she went even right up to college with it, learning this in high school and grade school. And it's very interesting to hear when I explain to her, like, oh, I just saw this on Instagram. And then she like reads the surah and she goes, wait a second, this is something I used to read as a child, and I did not know this. And I even played the sound. Anybody can go on YouTube and get the sound from a radio telescope, and it thumps.
Yes, it is fascinating because, as I said, when we learned Surah Al-Tariq in school, there was no such recording. So we couldn't even, of course, you take God's word for it. He created everything. I believe it. Let's move on. But now there's proof. There's actually a scientific proof that these 3 verses, talat ayat, they were not just poetry. It was not a code to something. It's actually referring to something that does exist and has been existing for many, many, many years, probably. And now God is telling us, I created that, and you better believe. So going back to what Ihab have said about some chapters in Quran, they start with 2 or 3 Arabic letters. One of them, Surah Al-Baqarah. Surah Al-Baqarah is the longest chapter in the Quran. And Surah Al-Baqarah starts Alif Lam Mim. Okay? ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This is the book. There is no doubt about it. A guide for those mindful of Allah. So Alif Lam Mim, even translation, it's Alif Lam Mim. Now, what I was taught in school is there were so many different theories. They're trying to break this code. It's a code. One theory is they say that the Alif Lam Mim, or the 2 letters that starts a surah, is a reference to names for God. We don't know what those are. So there were so many theories thrown at us as we learned these things in school. But at the end, Allahu A'lam. God is the only one that knows the truth behind these codes. Are these secrets? Are these codes when we break the code is going to be the end of time? Is it God that waiting to see the advancement, keeping of humanity, keeping that as mysterious as possible to push us to continue seeking knowledge and discovery and uncover all the beautiful mysteries of the universe? We have no idea. Only God knows. So that's what we were taught. But for the largest surah in Quran starts with that mysterious 3 letters or code, and there are other surahs they start with that. But why would you start with that? Why would you start Alif Lam Mim? Is it drawing, hey, pay attention, there's a code? It's like, what did you say? Alif Lam Mim doesn't make any sense. All right, keep reading, keep learning. Maybe the rest of the surah might decipher or explain the Alif Lam Mim. You end up finishing and learning the whole surah, you still don't know what Alif Lam Mim means. That's what I'm saying. Is it a tool to grab the human attention and be so intriguing that I want to read the rest of the surah? Before you know it, you just read it all. And as you're reading through Surah Al-Baqarah, there are so many different lessons that will strengthen your faith in God. So it could be a way of God saying, keep reading, keep learning, and keep reading. I have no idea. Again, Wallahu A'lam. So go ahead.
Here's the question for you, Dr. Slava. You read this, of course. I did not read this in school. Alif Lam Mim. Why even have it there? Just drop it. This is what I'm not saying it should be dropped, but does it really strengthen the whole surah? Does it really? I mean, what it does is it creates in your mind, like you said, like, hey, wait a second. Alif Lam Mim. Okay, maybe I'll learn something in the surah with respect to that, but there's nothing in there with respect to those 3 letters. So why even have it? Why even start with it? Why just not start with, boom, the surah, just go without it? And that's a really cool part of it.
The beauty about Quran, if I continue reading one more verse في Surah Al-Baqarah. So after going Alif Lam Mim, ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون, who believe in the unseen, right? Establish prayer and donate from what we have provided for them. Okay, so see how the order of al-ayat, the more you read, every ayah has a lesson, every ayah has a message. I believe that to start a surah with these 2 or 3 letters, yeah, I think it is a code. I'm not sure if they're going to end up breaking this code in my lifetime or beyond. I have no idea. But there are so many theories about these letters. But see how it says, this is the book, there is no doubt about it, a guide for those mindful of Allah. Then it goes, who believes in the unseen? You have to believe in the unseen. So Alif Lam Mim is the unseen. It's a code. We don't know what it is. But I believe it's a code, because what comes after Alif Lam Mim, every single verse, there is a proof of God's mighty and God's power and God's teachings and God's ability and God's creation. So Surah, the way they are composed, and the Surah, the way it has been written in an order to really capture your heart, and you capture your mind, and it captures your inquisitive nature, because nobody else knows how to manipulate humans like God. He created us, and he can actually manipulate how we are going to learn about these things through reading, through Quran. It is definitely poetry. Now, as a reminder to our audience and our listeners, our viewers that did not know this fact, Al-Quran was memorized by Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and all his disciples, right? And he made sure that his dying wish is not to write anything until he passes, to test those loyalists to memorize Al-Quran as the best they can. Number one. Number two, he made sure that Quran is not written because of all the raids that they have done and all the wars that they have fought. One of the things your enemies will do is destroy the book, right? So he made sure that he would recite and teach as many people as possible, women and men, equal, memorizing the Quran until the dust settles, until the faith, Islam, comes to a very peaceful time after Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ passed away and Abu Bakr ﷺ took over. Then they sat down, gathered everybody, men and women, and they wrote down their Quran from memory. Right?
How long after the Prophet died did they write it? Was it 10 years, 20 years? Do you have an idea? When did Abu Bakr take over?
Abu Bakr took over immediately. So, Wasi the Rasul, his wishes, dying wishes, alayhi salatu wasalam, is Abu Bakr to take over. And Abu Bakr took over immediately. And that's when they sat down and wrote. That's a really good question. I don't have the timeline for that. All I remember, from what I remember, we were taught, it was after his passing, they sat down and they wrote the Quran.
It was within Abu Bakr's lifetime.
I believe so. Don't quote me. I might be wrong because my memory, I should have checked it, but that's from what I remember right after he passed. They sat down and wrote Quran. Now, how many copies they had, how they protected it, like I said, because remember when Islam came, a lot of the teachings and a lot of the lessons that Rasul ﷺ taught his followers is, let's not make mistakes, right, of our ancestor. Let's learn from the past. We cannot lose knowledge, and they were going to write. Now, according to history, Rasul ﷺ was illiterate. He did not know how to read or write. And that explains the recitement of the Quran constantly in his court, teaching the Quran, because he didn't know how to read or write. He was a very clever merchant and businessman, and he made a fortune before his prophecy at age 40. But other than that, I'm not sure whether.
So I looked it up. Here's a very interesting thing. So it's very cool. It started. So regarding the fact the Quran was written in written form during the time of the Prophet. This is well known. However, some amongst those who create the confusion, and the final authorized form was completed and fixed under the direction of Abu Bakr about 650 AD. And again, the Prophet died in what year? 630?
I think he died in 640.
632.
Yeah.
640? So it wasn't long after. So it's not like, it was done 100 years later. It was written within the lifetime of the Prophet. So what happened was, it seems what they did was they were writing it down here and there, and then Abu Bakr collected it, like you said, from men and women, the collection of the writings that they wrote and the verbal as well, and created the final Quran. It was completed in 650.
So Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, he passed away June 8th, 632.
Yeah, and actually it says here, the final fixed version was under the third leader, Khalif Uthman. So
Uthman bin Affan.
It was completed in 650 AD. So 630 to 650, about 20 years to really gather and pull it together and make it a final form in 20 years. And that's the really interesting thing about the Quran. I believe in Christianity, I think it was longer because, let me know if I'm wrong or right on this, JD Yusuf. How long and when was the Bible kind of pulled together? Because there were different gospels, right? The Gospel of Luke, the Gospel of Paul, and there were other gospels that didn't make the final cut. So what do you think, and what have you heard?
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure on the number, but it was, there were books that were compiled during, the time shortly after the death of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
But I think it was 70 to 100 years that there were books in between. Now, it's not like they were, all written at one time. Some were written very early, some were written later. But I think to your question of how, did some books make it and some did not is based upon these councils. So after, Emperor Constantine took over the faith, okay, what happened was he tried to consolidate power. So he would call these councils to try to develop and articulate the faith a little bit more, right? So there wasn't any controversy, there wasn't this, there wasn't that. And so with that, there were multiple books that were being circulated around the Christian world. Some were being read here in, Greece. Others were just being honored in Jerusalem. They didn't want any of that. So they wanted to try to unify as best as they could. So that's where you get some books didn't make it and some books, and what that measuring stick was, I'm not sure, I'd have to do a little more research.
I was looking it up now, and just a quick glance. The Gospel of Mark was written around 70 to 75 AD. Matthew around 75, Luke around 80 to 90, and John around 90 to 100 AD.
So exactly after the collapse of the Roman, Jewish temple, and so right after that, then sounds like.
And then we talked about this earlier. The Gospel of Thomas. You mentioned it to me, and one of the things that pops up, it contains controversial material that early Orthodox Christian leaders did not agree with. Very interesting. There's a gospel written, and why why are some included and some aren't, and why is it controversial? These are the really interesting parts. And when you write something almost 100 years later, after the collapse that you were talking about, how good are people's memories? Again, a lot of religious scripture is, even in the Quran, it's verbal, it's memory, it's memorization. How good are people's memories 100 years later is the part that really makes me think like, wow, this is a long time. And if I pass something on to somebody, how well will they remember it for the next group of people? And remember that people's lives, people didn't live as long as we did do now. So, people, died by age 20, 25. So they would have had to kind of pass it on to the next person and keep passing it on. And I always wonder, again, why choose these 5 gospels? And, you had said that they all met and said, these are the ones we're going to use. Maybe because it was the Gospel of Thomas is controversial, but maybe it was written 200 years later. Who knows what came about? And you were right. This is when you said Emperor Constantine. That was the emperor that brought it all together, I believe. Was he the first emperor to become Christian? Is he the one that was?
Yeah, and that was also very controversial, and even in the Orthodox Church today, they'll even, it's a topic that I guess they don't really like talking about, but it is what it is, it's, I want to say he also was baptized on his deathbed, so he wasn't like again, what are your motives for, taking control of the faith and then trying to consolidate power? Yeah. Again, a lot of interesting questions. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think for Constantine, and my thought and looking at Constantine, it was to consolidate power, like you said, and also I believe he was seeing the rise of Christianity and thought to himself, if I don't get in on this, I'm going to be on the outs here at some point. So he's like, okay, consolidating power and saying, you know what, I'm going to become Christian, and that way I can bring the Christians into the fold with the non-Christians or whatever it might be that he was, ruler of. So again, it's a power play, right? You got to think of this as a power play on his part, because to him, I don't think for him to switch like that and become Christian, I don't know. I always look at leaders that where they all of a sudden change their religion. Like Genghis Khan, for instance, was not Muslim, but as they were attacking parts of the Islamic world and different Khans took over, they became Muslim. And why did they become Muslim? Is it because they believe in the religion? Maybe. But is it to consolidate power? That's probably why, I think, it's more of a power play than a religious play. And then maybe future Khans after that, that were born, they may have become more pious, more religious, and their belief, because it was part of the society at that point. And it's just interesting how the first ruler of some land says, I'm going to become Christian, I'm going to become Muslim. And then the following rulers after Constantine are all, Christian, right? And it's a really neat aspect. And is it a political power play, or is it a faith type based power play? Is it both? And I don't know the exact answer, but my belief for me is these first Christian emperor rulers or Muslim rulers from the East, it was something to consolidate power in the end. I could be wrong, but
No, and I actually do agree with that a little bit. I mean, we're also talking about human nature, and just, so we're clear to our audience, religion is something that's very beautiful, intimate, personal, right? But also you throw in the element of, human nature into anything, not just religion. All right. You're throwing the dice, that's all we're saying. But yeah, all of this, to kind of umbrella everything is, very interesting, very beautiful. We actually have a lot more in common than we actually think and
absolutely.
Want to, believe, right? There's, other forces that are at play that want to seek to divide, for whatever reason. But no, this is really good. And honestly, I'd love to put on another, maybe part 2, part 3, maybe bring on some more qualified guests as well, who can kind of point to some of these, not only religious, but historical stuff that we've been talking about, just to kind of complement what we're bringing to the table. And also, I don't think it's controversial to talk about any of this, especially if you're coming at it from, the sense of education, and you're being open-minded and you genuinely want to learn, period. Yeah. So I think that's beautiful. So thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah. And I think the unification, and looking at the unification of the three religions, I believe there's so much overlap that people forget the overlap and talk about the negative parts, not even negative, the parts that don't overlap kind of supersedes everything, and that's the part that really I wonder, and it's that human nature that you're talking about. It's like, oh, you know what? And 90% of it overlaps. Look at that 10% right there. It's not overlapping. And this is the part we're going to focus on. This 10% that's not overlapping. And we're not only not going to focus on it, we're going to fight over it. And we're going to create division by it, right? We're going to create this division amongst religions by this 10% that doesn't overlap. And it's wild, It's the thing that I always, that's why me as a person, I don't follow, a religion so closely, because that they look at that divisive part, or they look at that part that's not in the overlapping, like, the Venn diagram, right? You got these 3 circles and you got that overlap, and you got that 90% overlap, and that 10% outside that diagram is the part we really focus on. And it's a shame that we do that. And that's why you have a lot of division in the world because of these little parts that are, sure, they're not overlapping, but why don't we focus on the overlap? Create not a single religion, but create this unified thought that, hey, these three religions, the three main religions that we're talking about right now, the three books of the faith, the Abrahamic faith, why can't we focus on the 90% and let that 10% sit where it is? And, and if I feel like going out and standing there and go, you know what, I'm going to kind of look at that 10% myself, and I'm not going to push it or make it divisive, it'd be great, wouldn't it? And this, that would make a perfect world, but this is not where we live right now.
Right.
We live in a world that does not do that. So, and it's interesting to me as a scientist that you look at something that overlaps that much, and it's like, why are you looking at this small part here that doesn't overlap? So what? It doesn't. It's not, excluding the other 90%. There's 90% inclusive, 10% that's exclusive. Let's focus on the inclusive part. So
Yeah, I love that you said that. And Dr. Slava.
No, you guys have just tapped into our next topic that would like to get into, which is the scientific parallels, the biblical mysteries with scientific parallels. And I'll let J.D. Yusef get into that from a Christian Orthodox knowledge and education, and we can take it from there. So the circle of the earth, Isaiah 40:22, describes the earth as a circle before that was known or accepted. The water cycle references 36 describes evaporation, precipitation, and streams returning to sea. Now, which book does that come from? Is it the Bible?
I believe so. And which chapter?
So it says segment 3, the biblical mysteries with scientific parallels. So the circle of the earth.
Yep,
And
that
I-
actually
and I-
will come from the Old Testament. So, which would be, I guess the Torah as well for our Jewish brothers and sisters.
So I think about that. The Torah was written so long. I mean, like even it's pre-Christian, obviously. And to have that in the Torah. And again, when a Christian came up with this later, they talked about it. It was almost like sacrilegious. You could be executed for saying something. The earth is not flat. Remember, the earth was flat at some point in time when not in our lifetime, but back in their time. But the Torah spoke of it well in advance, saying that the earth is round. Well, it went from round to flat to round again. Think about this. Round, flat, round. Right? So
Yep.
Well, remember, it's built on the human advancement of discovery too. So if you were back then, think about it this way: if you're sailing back then across the ocean, it looks flat to you. So there's no other evidence or proof to think otherwise than it's flat. So humans have the tendency to record what they see. It's an observational data, right? There was no science. There's no rockets that went, through the atmosphere and looked at the Earth. It's like, oh, Earth is round, right? So, and then when the Torah was mentioned that Earth is a circle, they said, well, according to whom? We see it as flat, so it must be flat. And then the discovery have changed and the proof have changed, or the proof played a huge role in changing our mindset. And then, it is round. Now we can prove it's round. But we got to think about when these things were mentioned in the holy books, biblically, it was, take my word for it. That's what God is saying. But at the end, God knows best. Wallahu a'lam. right? So humans, in order for them to wrap their head around these mysteries, these discoveries, God's creation, it was hard back then. It's so easy for us to be sitting here 2025 saying that, well, yeah, it makes sense because we had seen and witnessed the proof, right, that these things do exist. Now we go back, and remember, there's no other books been written, modified, or built upon Al-Quran since the Quran was written. That was the end of all books. So the discoveries, now if you grew up in Saudi Arabia, the discoveries from the school of thought of the Wahhabism Center in Riyadh, they're not writing new books, obviously, but they are building a lot of theories, taking the new modern science discoveries, going back into Quran, just like a tariq, that piercing star, going back, it's like, hold on a second, that was mentioned at that date. Now we got proof. Now we got to match it. Then our faith is even bigger in God. Yes, God knows best because God created all creations. And I hope that makes sense. So just like I remember when in Saudi Arabia, for example, abortion was illegal because, you're killing a human life. And then in the 80s, they came into the discovery that they took it from science, a discovery that if it's beyond 4 weeks, yes, the fetus has a heartbeat. Before that, it's okay to abort because the fetus doesn't have life in it yet. It's only at the cellular level. So all I'm saying is they took the science and they modified or adjusted the laws and the rulings according to science without stepping on the tippy-toeing almost around the original fundamental principles of why this is needed in society, right? So things change, and I'm not trying to be controversial here, but I'm just giving you an example of how you can build upon these three books as time goes, because science is discovering so much, but we're trying to keep our faith intact. We're constantly reflecting. It's like, okay, hold on a second. What did Quran say? Okay, Quran said that. All right, science is saying that. Let's see if we can match them. And every discovery that science has made that refers to Al-Quran, it matches 100%. It is to the T. One of the things is how we were created, right? So there is surah isma Surah Al-Alaq. And Surah Al-Alaq is basically talks about human creation. And it starts by saying, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read. Okay? So Al-Alaq is basically the blood clot that we are created from. So a surah says Surah Al-Alaq, but it starts, read in the name of God who has created. خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ عَلَقٍ. Created human from that clot. اقرأ وَرَبُّكَ الْأَكْرَمُ الَّذِي عَلَّمَ بِالْقَلَمِ. That God, read in the name of your creator that taught us with the pen, but not necessarily the pen, is by writing and by reading and by creating. عَلَّمَ الْإِنسَانَ مَا لَمْ يَعْلَمْ. He taught human everything that they did not even have an intention to learn, because he created the whole universe. So all I'm saying is, going back, discovering how fetuses forms, comes with the sperm and the egg and created the fertilized, fetus, and then it gets implanted in the womb and it starts dividing, all that became the modern science discoveries. But as Muslim, as the faithful went back and said, okay, we just want to make sure that scientific discovery that has proof matches what God have told us. And you find so many proofs in the Quran of everything that's the surrounding us. That's the miracle of Quran. I don't, again, whether you follow the structure of religion, whether you're a devout Muslim, you pray 5 times a day and follow it to the T, or you are a libertarian, egalitarian, Muslim. Al-Quran, when you read Al-Quran, it takes you back to that. There is no way that you can't believe in it.
Here's something really interesting. You were talking about, this is kind of the verse you're talking about, and there was another verse later, and if you put them together, this is what it is. We made the sperm into a clot of congealed blood, and of that clot, speaking of God, we made an embryo, okay? Then we made out of that lump bones and clothed the bones with flesh. Then we developed another creation out of it. So blessed is God, the best of creators. So what happened is he does this and he breathes life into that. Like you were talking about the heartbeat and so on and so forth. But this was all written. Can you imagine reading this? And it's in Arabic. It made no sense. No sense what are you reading? Like clot of blood, flesh on bones. What the heck is this? You're not seeing anything. You don't have ultrasound. You don't you don't have like X-ray. You don't see anything. You're just like reading this. It makes no sense to you, and it's like, well, you have to believe it because it's kind of written. So until it's revealed later on in the 20th century, and with all the science behind it. So that's kind of really very interesting. Again, we were talking about a book that's its revelations are still to come, even of things that we don't understand. So, and things that we've learned over the last 20, 50, 100 years. So
Yusuf, do you guys? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, do you guys learn anything? Is there any reference in the Old Testament or the Bible about such scientific discoveries?
About this one particular embryonic one, I'm not sure. But about the concept of breathing life into, we certainly have that. I think Dr. Ihab mentioned something about also water being kind of an essential framework for life itself, right?
There's a life came from water. The Quran describes that Allah made from water every living thing. There's a surah or part of a surah. Another verse, separate one, describes how Allah has created every animal from water. Of them are some that creep on their bellies, some that walk on 2 legs, and some that walk on all 4. Allah created what he wills, for truly Allah has power over all things. These verses support the scientific theory that life began in the Earth's oceans, which is absolutely what happened.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
so
it's very beautiful, and it also scientifically matches up, right? So, but yeah, I believe that's kind of a shared concept in both as well. And also we have dirt, soil being also like another key ingredient or bedrock. I remember seeing that as well. Yeah, it's all very interesting to say the least. I think we can talk so much more about all this.
I think so too. Yeah,
it can definitely get overwhelming, even in my age. I mean, I've been hearing this all my life. I've learned it all my life, but the more I read it, remember when you read it as an adult with all the knowledge that you have, I've taken a gross anatomy in dental school. I dissected a human body. Honestly, we used to joke around at NYU. If you're an agnostic and you take gross anatomy, you have to believe. You have to start believing in some kind of, or atheist, sorry, not agnostic. If you're an atheist and take gross anatomy, after a gross anatomy course, you're going to have some kind of faith. Because and I say it to Ihab all the time, the human body is one of the most sophisticated machines ever created. When I cut a skull and pop that brain out of the skull to study it and dissect it, the brain is a black box, as if today's science, we know only maybe 10-20% what the brain does. Your gut, your GI, they call it the rainforest of the human body. We do know some things about it, but we haven't discovered all of it. And that's why now the new technologies, or the big trend, is to map the human brain for the new computers. But honestly, if you don't believe there's some kind of a divine power up there that controls and keeps everything in balance and creates, and take a gross anatomy lab. Just take it for one day. And I guarantee you're going to come out, you come out believing in something, or even creating your own religion. It doesn't really matter, but you're going to come out believing in something. It was the most fascinating thing I ever seen in my life. And then go seeing, after coming out of gross anatomy lab and watching humans interact and function and operate and metabolize, like talking to you guys, right? And seeing the dead, and seeing that cadaver, the structure of that cadaver, alive, moving and talking and breathing. It's fascinating. It's like, how? Just like when I went to the pyramids in Egypt and saw the pyramid, I kept saying, how? How can they build this? Where is the technology? Where is the science? But we're still discovering. So I guess what we would like to do in these episodes is to, like Ihab said, to find the parallels in all the religions and all the faith, to find the fact that we have more common ground than we even realize. Because I agree with Ihab, politics and greed and divide and conquer kind of attitude, they want to be fixated on that 10% that polarizes us and leave the 90% that really unites us, or unite humanity. So, I encourage everybody that is questioning to really dig deeper. These books have so much knowledge and so much poetry and so much confirmation that we are a lot more similar than we even know. But unfortunately, like I said, there's a small group of people that had a certain agenda that picks the lack of, instead of how much we can offer as humanity. But your thoughts, Yusef?
I think that is a powerful way to end such a like I said, beautiful, intimate subject, but also very controversial. And that's not what we're here to do at all, right? It's kind of counterintuitive to what we're doing. But I'd like to also add this one final note. We were talking about the Earth flat and being spherical. It's the ancient Egyptians that were first attributed to actually figuring this out, and it was them, I guess, cast a moon during a lunar eclipse was also around this observation, strongly suggests that Earth was spherical. Ancient Egyptians also noted that on the summer solstice, a vertical stick in the Aswan would cast no shadow at noon, while similar stick in Alexandria would cast a shadow. So just some kind of nice.
Everything starts with ancient Egyptians. I don't know. I haven't find out why that civilization, and I think a lot of people don't even know why that civilization was so advanced, and it's almost like they weren't on Earth, like the
aliens.
Certain.
That's what he says, aliens, but no, it's not.
Lizard people.
Lizard people.
So
right?
you're saying you have alien blood in you, Ihab?
Oh my God, I hope not.
I hope not.
Well, we will find out for sure as time goes by. Now, I've been married to you for 33 years. Sometimes I wonder, seriously, how your brain is wired. But regardless, whether you're Jewish, Muslim, Christian, atheist, Buddhist, agnostic, just spiritual, right? We are all human, and all we want to do, like JD Yusef said on this episode, is to show you guys how much we have in common, and you don't have to be an extremist to really admire or appreciate or respect other faiths, right? Everybody worship the divine or God or whatever you worship or that power out there, the creative power, the way you feel comfortable worshiping. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely is nothing wrong with that. Part of the beauty of Islam is really respecting all religions. And I'm sure Christianity teaches that and Judaism teaches that, because they are the religions of the books. Those books were sent on our prophets for a reason. Those are holy books. These are the books of the divine. So it's very, very important for us to send that message into humanity, especially the way things are going these days. So we are reaching the end of our hour, and I'm sure we can, like I said, talk about this a lot more. And we would love, if you guys like this content, to come back and tap into many, many, many other concepts of the holy writings. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. These videos are on the Greenwood Dental Partners YouTube channel. So please like, share, and hit the notification button. That way you won't miss any episodes. And these are uploaded every single Wednesday on the Spotify and the Apple Podcast platform. And let us know in the comments what would you like us to talk about. If there's specific topic or stories or inspirations that you guys want us to get into, let us know. I'll be very, very, very happy to oblige. So I hope to see you next time. This is Slava the Jordanian.